Okay, so today we are looking at text 6.1, The King's Speech, which is a radio drama and screenplay. So as you can see in the gap here, this is a written script intended for performance. So obviously the audience here is going to be wide. Initially you'll have the actors and the directors who are there, and then you're going to have lots of kind of general viewers, okay? So those with an interest in film, people who like to go to the cinema, perhaps fans of Colin Firth, and those with an interest in the royal family might be interested in this, or perhaps even those with an interest in speech impediments. The purpose is primarily to entertain, but there is an element of informing here as well, because this is obviously about a real king. So we've got Lionel starting off speaking with no any jokes, and Bertie replies, timing isn't my strong point. Okay, so what we've got straight away here is it's kind of like the conventions of an interview really, with turn taking and agency pairs, and straight away we see the power dynamic being established. So it's really clear that Bertie doesn't want treatment. Okay, he's really fed up with it, but obviously he's become the king, and if you haven't watched the film and you don't know the context, he doesn't really want to be king. He's not first in line to the throne. So that this opening section really is all about Lionel trying to establish some power and trying to get Bertie to accept the treatment. It's worth noting here, no any jokes, that this is kind of elliptical phrasing that obviously implies a level of informality, and the interrogative shows us that Lionel is the one who is leading the conversation here. Okay, so in terms of the power dynamic then, he's actually setting himself up as in control. Now bearing in mind that Bertie is the king, okay, this is potentially quite surprising, because in a formal sense Bertie has definitely got more power and higher status than Lionel, but what Lionel's trying to establish is that actually in this room I'm the one who has the power and is in charge. Bertie then replies, timing isn't my strong point. Now I've put stutter in brackets here because if you watch it in the film he actually stutters at this point. So this is him being quite funny really. Potentially it's establishing that he has a kind of a low self-concept, or potentially he's also refusing to be informal. So whereas this starts off as no any jokes, so the humour is obviously, and like timing is important in jokes, right? He's also potentially here refusing to kind of converge to this lower level of formality. And then we get the stage directions, which make the awkwardness really clear. So silence, they stare at each other. This is a screenplay convention, okay, to have the stage directions in this way. But it's definitely awkward. It's building tension, okay? And there's an element where they're staring at each other. That's confrontational, isn't it? They're not protecting face in the sense that we would expect them to, particularly Lionel. We would expect to be kind of quite deferential towards Bertie, and that's not happening if he's staring at him. So Lionel continues this kind of informality where he says cup of tea, and we've got the elision here in cup of tea. So what this is doing is it's really kind of informal and colloquial, and he's breaking down the conventions that exist in the normal power dynamic, where normally Bertie would obviously as the king be the one with the power, and he's trying to break down that power dynamic. Potentially he's also trying to assert some common ground here by asking him if he wants a cup of tea. In a normal situation, if you were talking to someone who wasn't the king and you offered them a cup of tea, that would represent convergence, wouldn't it? It would be you trying to kind of connect with them. However, potentially not here because Bertie is the king. Importantly, Bertie rejects that. No, thank you. Okay, so on one hand, maybe he is again refusing to converge with Lionel, refusing to be more informal. It's a snub. He refuses that downward convergence, but it's also framed in a polite way. Thank you. Okay, so let me just move this down a little bit. It is what we would expect of a king, isn't it? That kind of politeness and those good manners. Lionel then replies, I think I'll have one. So on one hand we've got this quality hedge, I think, so he's kind of minimizing what he's doing. actually what he's doing here is he's establishing that he's in control. So he's offered this cup of tea when when Bertie hasn't taken it. He says he'll have one anyway. So he makes it quite clear that he is in control of the situation here. Bertie then attempts to be quite transactional in his conversation. Okay, aren't you going to start treating me? And then we've also got the interrogative here, okay, which shows that he's getting quite impatient. He's not interested in this kind of offer of a cup of tea and this kind of informal conversation. He thinks that he's gone to see a doctor, and you can see he's used the formal address form of doctor there. That's him trying to establish, isn't it, these formal boundaries between him and Lionel. And he's getting quite impatient. Lionel's response, only if you're interested in being treated, is a face-threatening act. Okay, this is some positive impoliteness going on here. The conjunction only is really showing us that he's in control. So, well, I'm only going to treat you if you're willing to be treated. The elision you're is another example of informality as well. This is pretty impertinent for somebody who's speaking to the king. Please call me Lionel. Straight away, whereas we've had this formal address form before, Lionel's trying to kind of break down those personal boundaries and be more informal. Bertie gives us this short, abrupt sentence, I prefer doctor. He's kind of breaking the quality maxim here, being a little bit impolite, and this shows us he's obviously not happy with this attempt for Lionel to be more informal. Lionel is equally as abrupt when he replies, I prefer Lionel. And then he asks the interrogative, what'll I call you? So again, we've got that interrogative establishing the control here. It's interesting to look at this kind of echoing of phrases here, okay? Particularly, I prefer doctor and I prefer Lionel. You could say it's anaphoric, okay, that I prefer and I prefer, and there's almost that syntactical parallelism. However, what's different here is the noun that gets replaced there. So I prefer doctor versus I prefer Lionel. This is really showing us the gap in formality and how they want this relationship to turn out. We've got another elision here in what'll I call you, okay, so furthering the informality. And here, this is really direct. This is again some positive impoliteness. He's breaking down all of those social boundaries, okay, around formality and how we should speak to the king. Here, I think this little section with the echoing of phrases also is establishing Lionel's control and Bertie's discomfort. So this is kind of developing the characters for those people who are watching the film as well. Bertie then tries to regain that formality. So he says, Your Royal Highness, then Sir after that. These are very formal noun forms and a more formal sentence structure, okay? Which contrasts with a bit formal for here. So we've got this elliptical phrasing. What about your name? Okay, so much less formal. And this is in response to the kind of formal noun forms that have come before. So basically what Lionel's doing is he's saying, no, I'm not going to do any upwards convergence. You're going to have to converge downwards to me. Bertie then uses his full name, okay, which is obviously very long, and that kind of generates some humour. Sorry, I moved that down. She generates some humour here, okay, because this we can really see the formality of like his background and his upbringing. And then here we get the major kind of face-threatening act. So there's been some kind of impoliteness so far, but I would say this is where there's a real decrease in politeness from here on in, and a kind of attack on Bertie's negative face. So he uses this diminutive form. How about Bertie? This is obviously normally a term of endearment that would be used for the family, okay? So by using it in this context, Lionel's kind of establishing himself as more of a friend rather than suggesting that this is like a formal kind of work doctor-patient exchange. He's really breaking down those social boundaries. Okay, let's just turn over. Okay, so this real kind of this diminutive obviously has a real effect on Bertie. We can see that in the directions because he flushes, and it's unclear whether he's embarrassed or whether he's shocked, but we can see that this is really kind of destabilizing his negative face. He uses the adjective only my family uses that. That shows us what it's an exclusive term it is. And the fact that he uses the noun family, okay, it's reinforcing that this diminutive Bertie is a term of endearment, and he does not think it is appropriate in this situation. Just look at how Lionel then establishes control. Perfect. In here, it's better if we're equals, okay? That minor sentence is really showing us Lionel's control, okay? And again, it's that negative impoliteness. He's refusing to show, kind of to defer to Lionel's, not to Lionel's, to Bertie's kind of kingship, and that all of the kind of sense of face that comes with that. However, he does give a little bit of deference afterwards if we're equals, okay? So potentially here in this, he really kind of, this is like a face-threatening act, and he really doesn't respect Bertie here. And then afterwards, he's maybe trying to kind of re-establish Bertie's sense of self, his face. We would describe it as in linguistic terms. In this opening bit, he's refusing to acknowledge any discomfort imposed upon Bertie, but the if here kind of suggests that he might. Again, we've got this kind of echoing of phrases. If we were equals, I wouldn't be here. Okay? I'd be at home with my wife and no one would give a damn. Now, this profanity is really showing us his anger that he has to go through this at all. He potentially doesn't want to be king. He definitely doesn't want to have to speak publicly. Okay? And you can see the anger really in the way that he repeats the phrase. You can imagine a real emphasis on the if, can't you, here? Bertie then starts to light a cigarette from a silver case. Okay, so potentially this is really showing his discomfort again, that this is very awkward for him. He's going to smoke a cigarette as a distraction, and it's also the silver, okay, the adjective there showing us how wealthy he is. Now, we've already noted that there's a real decrease in politeness. I would say at this point here, there's an even further decrease in politeness. This is another face-threatening act. Don't do that. Total imperative, no politeness strategies. You could say it breaks the quantity maxim as well. And that impoliteness is really shown through the stage directions. Bertie gives him an astonished look. He is not used to being told what to do. So kind of breaking of all kinds of social convention here. And then to reinforce that even more, Bertie says, I'm sorry. So the rhetorical question really showing us that he's shocked by this. Down a little bit again for you. Lionel replies, sucking smoke into your lungs will kill you. Okay, so we've got the modal there showing this is definite, there's no uncertainty. That makes it very direct. There's and I've noted that as well, that's very direct. There's no politeness strategies here. This is a change really from the beginning where, okay, he was breaking down formalities, but he wasn't being kind of directly impolite. Bertie uses this kind of elevated Latin at lexis, my physicians, to really kind of re-establish those formal boundaries. Say it relaxes the throat, and look at the divergence here. They're idiots. Okay, so again, we've got more negative impoliteness. He couldn't be ruder, really. He's completely scorning and ridiculing the king's doctors, and doing it with this elision as well. So refusing to maintain formality, which then Bertie echoes again. They've all been knighted. And again, so we've got kind of similar syntactic structure in a sense, but totally switched around. They're saying opposite things, aren't they? Lionel's calling them idiots. Bertie's saying they're nice, and then Lionel makes this official then. I don't know that he could be more disrespectful here. You know, he's completely undermining Bertie's worldview about who and what is important. And then he goes on to finish with, my castle, my rules. Okay, so this is what he's been trying to establish all along. Okay, that's what he's doing a bit more gently in the opening of the extract when he's offering him a cup of tea. Here, he makes it completely direct. What's interesting to note, okay, is the pronouns here demonstrating that actually Lionel is in possession of the space and he has complete control. He also, with the noun castle, plays on the idea of being a king, okay? And he's actually saying to him, well, actually, this is my castle. I'm the king here. You're going to have to do as I say. And just the directness, really, and the complete lack of politeness establishes Lionel's authority.